Hello there, good people of the world. It is indeed your man, the Big Heavy. Recently got back from a multi-day camping trip. We went out for 4 days, 3 nights to the beautiful White Lake State Park up in New Hampshire. And I brought the Jackery 1500 with me. And as I usually tend to do, I also brought a couple solar panels, in this case, the Jackery Solar Saga 100. And if you're like me, you've seen the ads for the power banks, and I think all the manufacturers universally tend to have this sort of feature in their advertisements. And they paint this picture of being able to use these for essentially indefinite off-grid living. You know, there's always some hipster in the flannel shirt with a beard, with a moderately attractive partner, a dog or two, and they're out in a, shining Airstream or, a nice tent somewhere in some beautiful vista. And it looks like they've been there for 6 months and they're, probably going to stay there for another 6 months. And they have not a care in the world about running their cooler, their, television, their popcorn maker. And the marketing implies that these things paired with a couple solar panels will give you power forever. And the reality, at least here on the East Coast, is definitely not anywhere near that. So wanted to dispel some of those myths from real world experience, talk about what you need to think about if you are considering a battery bank / solar generator augmented with some solar panels, and some of the thought process you want to go through in sizing this as you buy it. So where we were camped was, essentially a fairly idyllic campsite for a human. So we were in a state park. There were not any power or water connections to the sites. Each of the sites was nicely wooded, so there's a fair amount of shade, which is fantastic if you're a human being. It's fantastic for all your equipment. Generally you don't want to set up tents in direct sunlight if you can help it, since that sunlight breaks down the materials of the tents. And we were right near a lake, so perfect spot to be if you're human. Not so great if you are a solar panel. Now, I'm not smart enough to know all the physics behind it, but essentially my understanding is as you start to shade portions of a solar panel, the impact on the output of the panel is not linear. So what I mean by that is, if you have 100% of the panel facing the sun, you're going to get 100% of the panel's output. That's fairly obvious. If half the panel is covered up by, say some leaves from a nearby tree providing you with some lovely shade, you actually get less than 50% of the panel's output. And that's similar if you just got a little bit of the panel covered. So, again, if there's some leaves that are, providing nice shade to your campsite, but also filtering the sun a bit, and it's covering effectively 25% of the panel, you're going to lose more than 25% of the panel's output. So in my case, having 2 panels, which theoretically I should be able to get about 200 watts out of, and in perfect conditions down at my home in the Carolinas where I can go out and have unobstructed views of the sun, get it just at the right angle to the panel. I've been able to get more than 200 watts from these 2 panels in the past, up to around 205, 210 watts. In this case, at my campsite in New Hampshire, with the sun at about the ideal angle, the panels positioned in kind of the best sun I could get, again, being in this nice, shady, lovely campsite, I was seeing at best about 120 watts, and that was, for 10, 15 minutes. And then the angle of the sun changed, which impacted the angle that it was going through the trees and leaves, and all that sort of stuff. I would say on average with my setup at this campsite with, trying to be somewhat judicious and moving the panels around to maximize their exposure to sun, I would see, on a good time, maybe 30, 40 watts. More realistic, I was getting dozens of watts. I was seeing 6, 7 watts pretty regularly, without paying too much attention to the panels. If I just kind of set them up and we went to swim in the lake or whatnot, I'd come back, and because the angle of the sun had changed and a variety of other factors, I was only seeing, 6, 8 watts. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I'll take any watts I can get, especially if I'm out camping. For this trip, I was mostly powering my IceCo portable refrigerator, which when it's running draws between 30 and 50, 60 watts in eco mode. And it's a variable device, so, it'll spin up, it'll run for 20 minutes, and then it'll sit there and kind of chill out literally and figuratively for 45, 50 minutes. So it's not a constant draw. And being able to put in, 20, 30 watts for an hour offsets an hour of refrigerator usage. So from that perspective, definitely a good thing. But from the perspective of being able to charge the pack, I was at a net decline for the entire 4 days we were out there. Every day I was, sucking juice out of the pack and adding enough in to kind of offset some running of the fridge, but not enough in to see my battery percentage move up significantly. even those periods when we had a good sun that kind of was managing to go largely through the trees, and I was goofing around trying to position the panels perfectly where I was seeing those 110 wattish inputs from both those panels, I still wasn't able to get the battery meter to bump up, even a single percentage. So the punchline here is if you're going to do something in the outdoors, all the max outputs of these panels assume direct sun, which means from a practical perspective, you're probably in the desert or you're camping in an open field or somewhere where you have excellent visibility of the sun. It also means from a practical perspective that you're out there goofing around with the panels, which means you're changing the angle, you're moving them around to follow the sun. Obviously the sun kind of starts at one side of the horizon and moves across the other side of the horizon. So if you're going to get, if you're assuming a full 8 hours of sun and you're assuming close to the max output of your panels, you're going to be spending that full 8 hours of the sun is out, tweaking ever so slightly every 10, 15 minutes or so, and ultimately taking that panel from an orientation that, I won't show you my janky finger, ultimately an orientation like this, assuming the sun's coming from this direction, to changing that angle as the sun shifts around to, rotating at 180 degrees at some point, if you want to maximize that energy. If you're a normal human that has a family and friends and a life and doesn't go out into the woods to play with solar panels all day, you're probably going to set it up, it's sort of a okay-ish angle. So when the sun comes up, you're getting sun till noonish, and then maybe you're missing it. If you've got two panels, you can do the old trick of having one facing one horizon and one facing the other horizon. And, that way you're maxing out at as close as you can get to 100 watts a day, assuming you have 200 watt panels. But you're not going to get anywhere near the max output of the two combined panels unless you're out there constantly goofing around with the things. That becomes even more of an acute problem if you're somewhere on the East Coast, or if you're somewhere, in the Northwest, or camping in a forested area where, again, you're hopefully somewhere beautiful where there's lovely trees and shade and all the things that are wonderful about camping, but are not so wonderful about solar panels. So the bottom line, if you haven't bought a battery bank and you're trying to think about how do I size this thing, if you are saying, hey, maybe I can undersize my bank, maybe I can go with a 500 watt hour power bank, and I'm going to throw 400 watt solar panels at it, and I'm going to assume I'm charging that puppy up every day. Consider, number one, you're not going to get max output unless, again, you're out in the desert and you're playing the panel dance game the whole time you're out camping, which you're kind of doing it wrong, in my professional opinion, if that's what you're doing. So if that 500 watt bank isn't going to last you for more than a day, and you're planning on taking long weekend 2-3 day-ish trips, you're going to end up being disappointed. You might end up with a portable fridge full of spoiled food if you run out on the first day because you actually went out and went fishing or swimming or did something fun instead of moving your solar panels around. If you get a cloudy day, again, you might end up with that ice chest full of spoiled food. So I would look at solar more for something fun if you're out camping. Maybe it's a little supplemental power. Maybe it gives you an extra half day over the course of a long weekend if, again, you're just kind of throwing the solar panels out and then doing normal human things. I would look at the solar panels maybe as supplementary in more of a disaster scenario. If you're at home and you're looking at having a power bank to charge up phones, charge up computers in an emergency, and then, maybe you are willing to go out on a sunny day and, goof around with the panels to make sure you can charge that thing up and have it for the next day. Because again, it's a state of emergency and, you're kind of operating on unusual circumstances. So like most marketing, don't believe the hype, don't believe these pictures of, beautiful hipster and his or her beautiful hipster partner out there for, 50 days on end, enjoying the free power of the sun. Don't believe the hype. Look at the panels as, a disaster recovery tool. Look at them as sort of some supplemental augmented power if you're out in the woods. And, look at them, I would say, as not the primary focus of your mission, which if you're going out in the woods is hopefully to have fun, to enjoy nature, to have a good time, to listen to some trains in the background. And I think in most cases, if you're going to spend an extra $400 on solar, I might consider taking that $400 and applying that to upsizing your battery bank. So hopefully that helps you in your camping adventures. I love having a battery bank. As someone that was in my past videos, I've talked about being a ultralight backpacker kind of guy, bike packer, all that stuff. And I, frankly scoffed at the car camping crowd, and I'm more than happy to eat my words on that. There's something great about being able to have fresh food and cold meat and all that stuff, and a big old 2-burner gas stove out in the woods, and cook some good meals and sit around the campfire with your family. So all about the battery bank. I would take that money that you are possibly considering putting into solar panels, and unless you have that disaster recovery use case, or unless you're going to be out somewhere in the West where you're in these wide open desert style spaces where, you throw 200 watt panels out and you are very likely to get 200 watts, and that meaningfully extends your battery capacity. And being in a desert, you're not planning on much rain. I would think of taking that money. You might invest in solar panels and consider putting that into a larger battery bank, or putting that into some other piece of gear that could really up your experience. Maybe it's a bigger stove, maybe it's a portable fridge or something like that. So that's my 2 cents on solar. Hopefully that helps with your decision-making process, and enjoy the woods. Peace.
Ever wonder why every talking head on YouTube asks you to hit the like and subscribe button at the end of their video? You were right, because we're living in a computer simulation. And our benevolent robotic overlords get just a little bit of energy every time you hit that like. So do me, the rest of civilization, and our benevolent robotic overlords a favor. Mash that subscribe, be kind to each other, keep living your simulated dreams.